thank you all for welcoming me so nicely last week and again this Sunday, and for giving me that voice difficulty. You were also encouraging that somehow I kept going, and I appreciate that. In America, we have a listing every year of what to talk about each Sunday. So when invited to speak, we don't have to worry so much about what the subject will be. Here, we don't use that same list. And so it's always a challenge. It's easy just to show up and say, well, here I'm going to impose this thought on you. Swami Kriyananda says that he always listens when he speaks. He's always reaching out inside and trying to hear the thoughts and the needs and the feelings of the people who he's sharing with, because we don't really teach. We share. We try to represent something that is not ours. We don't profess to know all the truth. We've been blessed to be introduced to some of the truth. And as we read the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, we realize that the truth is very big. And our minds, most of the time, are very small. As you've all grown up in the Indian educational system, you're very aware of how this list of information that you have to memorize is given to you, and then at the end of a certain period of time you'll be tested on that list. And if you've memorized the list properly, then you'll get a good grade and you can continue. But if you've not memorized the list, then you may have problems. Of course, in life, lists don't really work all that well. Because if you were to have a list in life, the answer to every circumstance, then that would be a very long list. And of course, that list would need to be uniquely different for each one of us. Because while generally we all do the same things, we do all of these things in very unique ways, in a very unique perspective. God has made us all individually, uniquely. And through our lives, we see life differently than the person next to us. Each of you is now in a different chair. The angle that you're at when you look at me speaking is different. And we learn to generalize about life and say, well, life is generally the same. Almost all of us eat food. Yes, there have been recorded exceptions in history, but generally speaking, we all eat food, and yet each of us eats differently. We eat different size bites. When we are served the food, we prefer a little bit more of this and a little bit less of that. And we may prefer to eat at a different time. We may prefer to not eat. We may prefer to have a conversation when we eat. We may prefer to eat in silence. All of these differences make each of us unique. And yet, the nourishment of the food, the principle of being nourished by food, is the same for everybody. And it's the same in the spiritual life. The ways that mankind has sought to attune himself to spirit has been diverse throughout history. The words that are used, the language that's used, the culture that's being expressed, the understanding of the times in which a person has lived, and their own unique circumstances within that time and place. And yet, the nourishment underneath is the same. And this is the essential reason why the science of yoga is a science and not, quote unquote, a religion, although you can make a religion out of it. But the science of yoga is about those things which are the same, no matter what spicing you put on it, no matter what time of the day or night you engage in it, no matter what country you live in, what culture you live in, what age you live in. This is an eternal truth. This is why it's called Sanatana Dharma, the eternal Dharma, not the Dharma of, that somebody made up just for their time and place. And so when we see sectarianism, what we see is people who are saying, no, it's never been as good as this. My cook is the best. My way is the best. My song is the best. My style is the best. My building is the best. My guru is the best. My clothes are the best. My. Who owns this? Is there anybody in history who can say that they own truth? No. No master would come and say, I own the truth. No. They would say that they represent some part of the truth. Because the truth is, and there was a movie, and there's a famous line in the movie, you can't handle the truth. Does anybody know that movie? I forget what it's called. What was it called?
A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men, thank you. You can't handle the truth. The truth is that we can't handle the truth. Because the truth is infinite. And our current ability to perceive is finite, is limited. And the distance between infinite and finite is infinite. That's a big difference. But the good news is that God has given us all the potential to receive the infinite. But we can't expect, there's a very fun story you may have heard. Yogananda's first disciple in America was Dr. Lewis. And they had a very unique relationship because in human terms they were friends. But of course in spiritual terms, Master was Dr. Lewis's guru. And anyway, so Dr. Lewis had been on the path for some years and had had a number of, we would generally describe as encouraging experiences. And he wanted to experience samadhi. And he used to ask Yogananda, he says, give me it, give me samadhi, give me samadhi. And, Master would just sort of change the subject and ignore it for a long time. And one day, Dr. Lewis got very sort of tired of waiting. He decided that he was going to get Master to give it to him. So he went to Master and he said, give it to me. I want it. I want it today. Give me samadhi. And generally in their relationship, Master was, today we would say mellow. We would say he was easygoing and not particularly stern. But in that moment, Yogananda turned a switch in his consciousness from being his friend to being a representative of the infinite truth, the power of God. And when he turned that power on, he literally backed Dr. Lewis up against the wall. And he said, if I gave it to you, could you take it? And when Dr. Lewis started to feel the power of that presence flowing through Master in that way, he looked down at the ground and said, no, sir. He said, no, I understand. That's okay. If you were standing on the edge of a cliff with you don't know how far down it's going to go. Remember the story in Autobiography of a Yogi? And that man sought to find Babaji. And he climbed up into the mountains, and he got up there, and he gave himself to the feet of Babaji and said, "Sir, I want to be your disciple." And Babaji says, "Well, you're really not ready for that. I cannot receive you in your current state of mind." And the disciple, or the potential disciple, said, "Well, if you won't accept me, I'm going to throw myself off the cliff." And Babaji said, "Okay, go on. Goodbye. Have a good flight." I don't think he actually said that. Anyway, this young man did. He went over to the edge of the cliff and he threw himself off. Think about that for a moment. Think about your life today. The people that you know. The things that you do. Are you ready to throw yourself off a cliff? Are you really ready to embrace infinite truth? No, I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm saying this that we need to evaluate what it is we are really interested in. Where do we really live in our spiritual life? What is it that we really want? And it's absolutely okay to say not today. Maybe next week. God has given us an endless ticket. This ticket never needs to be renewed. This ticket is we can travel on the train of the creation for as long as we want. And there's no judgment. There is no God up there saying, "And you're evil or bad because you're not ready to jump off a cliff." I love this. See, all this noise has been my fault. I'm turning this phone off, and I hope that you will do the same if you have been bad like me and left your phone on. And this reminds me, when I came to India in 2005, and Swamiji was, maybe it was 2006, we had the Mahasamadhi celebration at the Bristol Hotel in Gurgaon, and everybody had been asked to turn their phones off a number of times. And Swamiji's speaking eloquently as usual, and the next thing you know, there's a phone ringing. And he's going, Swamiji doesn't really get upset much, but you could see there was just a little bit of, like, edge in his voice. Just, not much. Mostly, just a little, Oh, come on now, let's, turn your phones off, please. But it kept ringing. And he said, it was his phone. And so he had to pull it out in that moment. And it was very, very funny. Very funny. So I don't know what I was talking about. I was talking about Babaji and this guy who threw himself off the cliff. And that the train ride, we can stay on the train ride as long as we want. But the thing is, we need to evaluate for ourselves exactly what we're doing. We want to do it, make a choice. For thousands and millions, we don't know how long, we've been on the train of life, and we don't even know where our station is. We don't know where we're supposed to get off. Usually when you get on the train, okay, I'm going to Calcutta, I know when to get off. But on this train, we don't even know there's an exit. There's a movie called Into the Wild. Have any of you heard of this movie? I see one, only one, okay. This is a movie about a young man, an American man who grew up in, I'd say at least upper middle class America, had all the basic advantages, went to a good university, graduated. And when he graduated, he actually had money in the bank. And he was told his father he was going to go to graduate school, or he was going to go to medical school. But somehow, from the time that he graduated till the time that he was supposed to go to medical school, he made a different choice. He took the money, which was a substantial amount of money, from his education fund, and he donated it to charity. And he gave all of his things away, except things that he could carry on his back. And then he traveled around the country for a couple of years, just seeking himself, seeking his sense of how to be happy, because he was so dissatisfied with the world that he'd grown up with. Even with all of those advantages, beautiful scenery, but his heart wasn't full. He saw how people lived lives of, as it's been described, quiet desperation. They keep going and going and going, but they don't get anywhere. And they never arrive at the station of well-being and happiness, but they don't know where that station is. They don't know how to find that place. And so he wandered around under the general heading of trying to get to Alaska. For some reason, Alaska was calling him because he wanted to live out in the wilderness, completely away from people, and to be one with nature. And so he had all these adventures, and he was actually a very positive influence on people that he met. He made some nice friends, and he expressed quite a bit of positive understanding for a man in his mid-20s. And these people were touched by his life, and he finally did get to Alaska, and he got out into the middle of nowhere, and he lived there, off the land, for an extended period of time. And he was sort of making it up as he went along. He didn't really know what to do. He just knew that he had to do it. And so he discovered, as he went along, how to survive out there. Unfortunately, his skills were really not all that great. And the food that he brought kind of ran out. And over a period of time, he had a book about plants and living off, the nature. And he was not a vegetarian. He'd been vegetarian, he'd been even in more trouble. But he would, try to shoot game. And anyway, he went out one day with a book. He was looking at the plants. He ate some plants. And then he didn't feel so good. And then he read the book some more. He had eaten the wrong plants. And these plants that he'd eaten were plants that basically, if you didn't get help, you were going to starve to death. It made you suppress your appetite, your digestive system. And unfortunately, he was out there in the middle of nowhere, and he starved to death. And then they made a movie about it. And this movie, in its own way, is very inspiring. This young man sought his own truth in his own way, and he touched lives. And his message at the end of this movie was, you can't be happy unless you share it with others. This was really the message. It's a beautiful message. It's been my experience that when I've traveled quite a bit in my life, but it's always been the people that I've met that have been even better than beautiful scenery. But this truth is a small truth. This is a truth that we've all grown up with. That, well, not so much in Indian tradition, of course. You have a great culture that recognizes these larger truths. But in America, we don't have that. In America, in Judeo-Christian tradition, the best you can hope for is to get into heaven. Really. The Jews don't even talk about the afterlife. But the Christians, they say, well, you know, if you don't break too many rules, right, and if you give enough money to the church, you'll be okay. This is a very vague and hopeful, you know, I mean, it's better than thinking, the people who think that you just, that's it, you're done. That, you know, all consciousness is gone at the end of life. That's not very hopeful. That's kind of like, and that's why you find people who are very uneasy. They're uneasy with themselves, they're uneasy with life. There's a much greater truth. And the good news is that we all instinctively know it, but we don't necessarily have the tools to explore that truth. So if you grow up as a young man or woman and you are interested in science, you begin to learn that there's a mechanism of discovery. There's a mechanism for understanding what exactly is going on in any circumstance. And the father of that understanding in what we describe as modern times, which is only, you know, some thousands of years, modern times, is Patanjali. Everybody's heard of Patanjali. Patanjali didn't give a set of dogmas that you have to believe. He didn't give a list of things that you have to take on his word. And much of what he's written is not even so much about how to do it, but that as you grow spiritually, these are the things that will naturally happen. So the inference is that if you practice the things that will naturally happen, they'll begin to happen more readily in your life. And so the science of yoga is all about doing things that are very practical in order to figure out where your exit is and when you want to get out, the training of life. Because we don't actually know. We don't know when we're going to really be ready. I mean, we might be saying, yeah, I'm ready. But when we get to that moment, like Dr. Lewis, will we go like this and open our arms and say, I am ready to embrace infinity? Or will we say, well, maybe just one more ice cream cone? One more this, one more that. We all have this and that in the back of our minds. So when Patanjali describes Sanatana Dharma, the truths that have always been there for us to understand, he's not telling us what to do. He's giving us opportunities to attune ourselves to understand how life works from the inside out. And then we can choose to participate in that consciously if we're interested. And so, because there is no hell to go, I mean, there are times and places on this planet today, no hell could be worse. I mean, it's, you know, you don't need to die to get into a very dark and unhappy place. But we do, if we want to get to the reverse of that, into happiness, we have to choose it. We can't just go along the path of thinking that we're going to stumble into it, thinking that you know, one day I'm going to be at the market, and on the shelf there's going to be something to eat, a pill, a fruit, some tangible thing that I can put in my mouth and swallow, and it's done. I'm one with infinite spirit. Of course, we do find books on shelves, and they're not magic pills, but they are manuals. They're manuals, they're information, And they're not just that, they are nourishment in the sense that along with the information, they have vibrations. They have a presence to them. Anybody who has seen the Autobiography of a Yogi, and you look at Yogananda's picture on that book, I mean, of course, not everybody responds to it, but commonly the people who do respond to it comment on, I felt something. When I looked at his face, I felt like he was there with me. When I read the book, I felt that he was with me. When I read about Babaji, I felt that he was just this close. This feeling, this vibrational connection is an essential part of the spiritual life. We can't just take in information, we have to take in vibrational content. We have to be changed by it. Just in the way that the nutritive value of your physical system is changed by when you eat. So when we absorb spiritual truth, our vibration, our aura, our energy field is changed by absorbing that. And one of the stages of spiritual evolution that Patanjali talks about is the stage of absorption. Dharana, absorption, being completely absorbed into. And this, of course, we might say in the higher sense, being totally absorbed in spirit, but this idea of absorption, being absorbed in the things that we do in order to grow our spirits, is what I want to talk about today. Which has taken me some time to get to. So all of the things that we do, no matter what they are, I mean, there's thousands of techniques in the larger body of the yoga teachings. And we could choose any of them. I mean, Yogananda said if you practice only 100th of what I give you, you could achieve realization. So we can't expect to do it all. But the things that we do, we must become absorbed in. We can't do them lackadaisically. We can't just go through the motions. You can do 1,000,000 kriyas, as it says in Autobiography of a Yogi, and not achieve God realization if you don't absorb while you do it. And if you truly absorb while you do it, if you make a few mistakes, they won't be as big of a problem. There's a wonderful story, and I don't remember all the details. I'll paraphrase the story. But there was 3 men who lived on an island and in the Mediterranean. And they were reputed to be quite holy. So one of the leaders of the church, the archbishop or some bigwig, came rowing across the water one day to meet these reputed holy men. And he arrived and he met them. And he asked them, well, what do you do? I don't remember exactly what they did. Maybe somebody does, but it's something like, we 3 are, something or other, and we love God. It was like super simple. And the archbishop said, excuse me, but that's just not the right prayer. You can't, that's not going to get you anywhere. You can't do that. Here's the right prayer. And so they were open. They said, oh, well, teach us, please. And so he taught them the church-approved prayer. And so, thank you so much. Oh, this is so great. We're all so happy. And he felt, the archbishop felt that he'd done his good deed for the day. And so he rowed off back towards the, church on the other side of the water. And he got some distance away from the island. And these 3 men who were holding hands came trotting across the water. Says, we've forgotten the prayer. We can't remember the prayer. Tell us again. And of course, the archbishop got the message. He says, Don't worry, you're doing the right thing. But the story doesn't say that the archbishop went back and studied their way. He probably just went on back to church and kept his mouth shut. And as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, God will hear any prayer with any words if you are absorbed in it. If your heart is fully committed to that prayer, if you are really in it, God will receive it. But if you're just going through the motions, hey, God knows you're going through the motions. Hey, the motions are better than going backward. You know, there are people who are on the train of life, but instead of elevating themselves, they're busy in reverse. They're pulling themselves down by their selfishness, by their overindulgence in negative things, things that will keep them bound, heavier. I wanted to read one of a particular aphorism. The previous aphorism says, yogis who have not achieved the state of savikalpa samadhi, they have to come back. Okay, we understand that. I mean, disappointing. We want everybody to be happy. Everybody should have samadhi. But if you don't make it, then you have to come back. Now there's some things that you can do in order to get to that state of samadhi. And here in the next aphorism he says, for others that highest state is attained through faith based on experience, strength of will, mindfulness, retaining constantly the awareness of God's presence, and conditioned oneness. Well, I guess he was saying in the previous one it was nirvikalpa samadhi. So if you achieve nirvikalpa samadhi, then you don't have to come back. If you're less than that, you do. Even savikalpa, you can be aware of being one with God, but you haven't fully been freed from your ego connection. So we have faith, strength of will, mindfulness, conditioned oneness, meaning the highest state of meditation that you could achieve, and discrimination. In other words, making choices that will lead to upliftment rather than that will cause you to lose your connection to spirit. So if we want to think about absorbing ourselves in the spiritual life, what is it that we want to be absorbed in? And again, we have to have faith, but faith is based on experience, so we have to have experiences that grow our direct knowledge, experience of God's presence in our lives. So we have to be absorbed in paying attention to that part of life. We have to be absorbed in strength of will. We have to be strong. We are not going to passively experience God's presence. We need to cultivate. It's interesting because we think of saints as being humble, and yet simultaneously they're powerful. And we don't often think of strength and power as going together, but they do. And if we look at history, we look at all the saints, we see there was great power flowed through their lives, but it wasn't misused. See, if you get to samadhi too quickly, you realize that the power of the universe is yours, and then you use it with your ego, then you can fall. Then you cause your own harm to your own self. So we have to be careful with the power, but we have to grow our ability to channel the power. This is one of the reasons we do energization. But it's not just the power, it's the power of spirit connected to the will. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand about meditation, is that meditation is an act of will. It's an act of attention and energy flow. Energy is flowing in ever greater amounts when we meditate. But it's not tension. It's not grim determination. It's relaxation. It's the more relaxed you become with focus, the more energy can flow. But you must will it. And we must attune that will, be absorbed in the will of the Guru, be absorbed in the will of God. Let it guide our increasing ability to be focused and energetic and powerful. So power is one of the 8 aspects of God. It must flow through our lives. But in order for that to happen, we must do it as an act of will. So this is one of the great things when we do energization. We learn to send the will energy to different body parts. And that same principle we can learn to send the will to circumstances in life. Or send the will to your own habit patterns. Send the will to whatever needs attention in your life. And as we learn to access our willpower, we recognize that the word "our," it's God's will through this form. And in the beginning, it's like, I'm here and God's there. But over time, it's God flowing through this form. God's will flowing through this life. Attunement to God's will. Absorption in that which is most beneficial for everyone, not this little ego. And so this principle of absorption can be brought to all of these aspects of what we're trying to accomplish. Mindfulness, always constantly being aware of God's presence. So God is present, but God is also living through us. Let God live through your form, through your mind. And then oneness, conditioned oneness, meaning for us it really means meditating as deeply as we can and being absorbed in that. You know, a child that's just learning to walk is absorbed in that walking, even though it's not running. But they're fully there. They're tipping. They're right there, 100% there. We want to be absorbed in whatever level we have gotten to, and not so much worrying about where we're going, but being fully entered into that which God has put on the plate of our lives. And then we eat that, and then as we grow spiritually, God gives us more and more refined foods, more and more things specific to our own unique journey. And then choosing, being absorbed in choosing those things which will lead to upliftment. Really being committed to that. At minimum, recognizing. So when I eat the cookie, or maybe the first cookie was okay, but the 5th or the 6th cookie wasn't such a good idea, but at least I know I'm doing it. At least I'm not acting like I'm not doing it. And so I'm saying, Lord, okay, I know I'm not supposed to do this. This might be a little too much, but we're going to do this and see what happens. And when we even share with God our mistakes, overindulgence in cookies is, generally speaking, not one of the big problems in life. Okay? But when we make choices, even when you're doing something that you know that God would prefer it if you didn't do it, do not exclude God from that experience. Bring God into it and say, you made me do it. You gave me delusion. You made me limited. Look, this is your world. This is your thing. And so you got to come with me and do this. And we get the karma from everything that we do in life. But at the same time, as we grow spiritually, good karma, bad karma, karma, we don't care. It's all karma. I don't want to even pay attention to that. Where is God's presence in this karma? The more we make friends with God, the more we absorb ourselves in God's influence and participation in our lives, then that absorption will lead to transformation. And over time, that transformation will lead to the natural expansion of consciousness, which will lead to the experience of oneness. So, as you go through your week, give your mind more attentiveness to the level of absorption, the level of attention that you give to what you're doing. And in particular, your spiritual practices. Give yourself more fully to them. Give yourself whatever level they're on. If you're doing 5 minutes of meditation, give yourself to it. Don't think, oh, I'm only doing 5 minutes. Think, I'm doing 5 minutes. Give yourself to it. Be enthusiastic. Energetic and enthusiastic. This is the way we approach life. And the more we absorb ourselves in that attitude, the more success we'll find in everything that we do.